All right, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
And it is so great to see all of you today. So we're expecting to have another great roundtable discussion. I'm Anna Johnson for Charleston County District 8. And I always like to start out with a pledge of allegiance. So let's get that going, okay?
Okay.
So, y'all see my flag? This. Y'all see my
Gotcha.
flag here?
Yes.
We got you.
Y'all got it?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the United
United
States
States
of America,
and to
and to the republic
for which
for
it
which it
stands,
stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with
with
liberty
liberty
and
and
justice
justice
for
for all.
all. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right. I don't have a real big office like Miss Hess's sitting over there yet, so.
That's okay.
So today we have a really exciting topic, history preservation. How about that? And I certainly want to thank our speakers today. So we have Mr. Breland and Ms. Harness with us from South Carolina Historic History and Archives. And I'm not looking at my notes, y'all, because I can't find it. Okay, oh, there it is. Anyway, from the Department of History and Archives. This is really exciting. And we also have our planning staff with us. They're going to also give us some information about our historic commission's mission and support us with how to preserve historic buildings and communities here in Charleston County, and beautiful, beautiful Charleston County. Or I should say beautiful, beautiful, historic Charleston County. Now you can't beat that. Even if you're from Marlborough County. So anyway, I'm excited to hear what you all have to share with us, because we do have something happened a couple of days ago on James Island as far as preservation, talking about preserving a historic building on James Island. And this building came about, well, a rumor was being spread that this historic building might be destroyed. And we were all up in the air about that all of a sudden. Now, the building has been there for probably over 100 years, and we're used to seeing it, but we didn't think about, you know what, we should try to preserve that building, get it restored, and you know, have it as a historic site in our area. So all of the ruckus that went around caused us to go and talk with the owners. And this is something in our discussion too, I hope we could really cover good about when we see, you know, place of historical significance, and we think it should be preserved, but we don't own it. Then, you know, how do you deal with that? So with all that, I am going to open it up for discussion right now, and we're going to start with our planning department first. I think is that where we're going to go?
I think we were going to let the Department of Archives and History start,
okay.
and talk about their process with the state, and then follow up with our process.
All right. Well, have at it.
All right. So I'm Virginia Harness. I'm the architectural historian and National Register co-coordinator, along with Edwin, here at the Department of Archives and History. We are both part of the State Historic Preservation Office, also known as the SHPO for short. So I'm gonna try to share my screen. So bear with me if this goes wrong.
I can hardly hear you.
Oh, you can't hear me?
Yeah, I can barely hear you.
Is that better?
So it's still like a whisper,
No?
like you're like in the distance. I don't know if anyone else is having that problem. I can hardly hear
Oh,
you.
I'm not having that problem.
No?
I can
I'm
hear.
not having that problem either.
Yeah, I can hear you clear.
Okay. I'm not sure who was asking that, but maybe if I don't know if you can turn your volume up.
Geraldine Chafer Singleton.
Check the volume.
Yeah, maybe I don't know if you can turn your volume up at all.
I have it up fully.
Oh man. I'm sorry. Just gonna do this. Okay. Can y'all see Taps building?
Oh, yes.
Okay, great. All right. We're gonna switch over to this. Okay. So I'm going to talk with you all a little bit about the National Register of Historic Places. So the National Register is a federal program. It was created as part of the National Historic Preservation Act in 1966. So it's been around for a little while at this point. Even though it's a federal program, the state historic preservation offices do kind of the lion's share of the facilitating of the nomination process. So in South Carolina, that generally means, that people come to us and say that they're interested in listing a property, and it's my job and Edwin's job to shepherd them through that entire process. So the National Register is largely honorific. It has very limited protections and benefits for properties that are listed. In the vast majority of cases, it will not prevent a building from being demolished or altered in any way. The only time that might come into play is if there is like a project that involves federal funding or federal permitting. Then there would be some level of review. And there are a couple of state permits that also require that, although they're probably not super likely to be relevant to a lot of what we're dealing with. One of them is the DHEC mining permit, which I'm guessing is maybe not super relevant to a lot of what we're discussing today. And then there's the Office of, Ocean Coastal Resource Management permit, which may be slightly more in play, but that review is very minimal. So mostly it's going to be that federal funding or permitting that would trigger any kind of review. And even then, it does not guarantee that a historic building would be saved in an instance where it's affected by a federal project, because they have to consult with our office. They have to consider the impacts to historic resources, but if they cannot avoid them, then they will mitigate them, which often means, like documenting the property in some way, putting up interpretive signage, that sort of thing, but it's not a guarantee that the resource won't be lost. So that's a common misconception people have, is that the National Register offers substantial protection for historic resources, and it does not. What it does provide is it provides really good incentives for preservation. So there are historic tax credit programs, which is a big one, especially here in South Carolina, because there's a federal program for income producing properties that are listed in the National Register. And then there's also a state income tax credit that piggybacks on top of that. And then we also have a homeowner tax credit for owner occupied properties. So those are something that incentivize people to preserve the property. And if you opt into those programs, then your project comes under review, and it's limiting in terms of, changing the historic character of the building. So that's kind of the initial introduction to what the National Register does and doesn't do. So this is our website. And I just wanted to point out this page. This is our general National Register page. You can get to it under this historic preservation heading. There's a bunch of interesting stuff here, and you'll see under programs, National Register markers, which Edwin will get into. There's also a lot of research resources, some of which I'm going to talk about here shortly. But this page offers kind of a summation of what I've talked about. It talks about the different kinds of resources that are listed in the National Register. There's a lot of different sorts of things. Also, it talks about, there are a lot of links, you know, for frequently asked questions and sort of links to help you understand the process of listing something in the National Register, which I will also get to shortly. So a lot of times people's first question is, well, is my property already listed in the National Register and how do I find out? Probably the easiest way a lot of times is to call or email our office, me or Edwin, and ask because we can get to that information very quickly. But there are ways to access it publicly as well. So the first thing we have is called SC ArcSite. And I'm going to go to the public view map. There's a subscriber view, but that's really for archaeologists. Archaeology sites are protected to prevent looting. So this is great because you can search by a specific address. So I'm not going to do that for the minute. I'm just going to put in Charleston SC up here. So it's taking a second to load. Here we go. So you can see there's all these, you know, various dots and triangles and polygons all over this map. So these represent places that have been listed in the National Register, places that have been determined eligible for the National Register, and places that have been surveyed. So they've been looked at and determined eligible sometimes, though more often not eligible. So let's see, we were just talking about, somebody said they were from Soligree. Let's go down there. Nope, that's not what I want. Here we go. So here you can see, this is good because we have several different types. So we have a listed property here, Mosquito Beach Historic District. So that's the blue polygon, or if it was, because it's a district, it's a polygon. If it was 1 point, it would be a blue triangle. So here's a little triangle you can see. So this is a listed property in the blue. This darker purple means eligible for listing. So this is the whole Soligree community, which was determined eligible as part of the Charleston County Survey in 2016. And then these dots here, like this one, for example, here's a property that was surveyed and it was determined not to be eligible for the National Register. Now, survey is not written in stone. It's a snapshot in time. So some things that, you know, were surveyed as not eligible 30 years ago, we would list now, absolutely. So keep that in mind. This is not an end-all be-all thing that cannot ever be changed or reconsidered. So this is great if you want to look at a specific address and kind of see if there's already been a determination or a listing in that area. Now I will say ArcSite's not infallible. Sometimes the points are in the wrong place. Sometimes they haven't been added yet. So take it with a grain of salt, but it's a good starting point. The other website that I would recommend is called the South Carolina Historic Properties Record. We call it Skipper for short. So this is where all of our National Register listings live online. And you can search it. You can do search National Register. You can also search the statewide survey, though not all of that has been digitized yet. This here is a survey card, for example. But all the listings are up here. We try to keep an updated list of newer listings on the homepage. And so this is a great resource. And also, if you're looking for a property in a historic district, you can go to ArcSite and look at the specific address to figure out what district it's part of, and then come to Skipper and search for the name of that district. You will probably not have very good luck searching by address in Skipper because say a property is listed in a historic district, it's not going to have every single address searchable for that whole district. So that's just something to keep in mind. If you come to Skipper and you don't find something, it doesn't mean it isn't listed or otherwise recorded. It may just not be kind of hitting the search parameters that we have set up.
I have a question. Can you search for the W. Gresham Maggott School?
Oh, absolutely. Yep.
Thanks. I want to see if there's any other things in the area that might qualify since we're talking about this right there.
Oh, for, you mean on ArcSite? Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, yeah, this is good because I have the address here.
Okay,
Councilwoman,
yes.
Pastor Morrison.
Oh, yes, okay. Good to see you.
I could not get on through the computer or the tablet, so I had to call in.
All right, thank you.
I'm on.
So here is Gresham Megget Elementary and High School here in this blue triangle. So it looks like here's an eligible site right here. Looks like multiple plantation landscapes.
Okay,
And there are a couple listed properties within there. Let's see, this is just
A
says
White
White
House.
House. Some
Oh.
of the information on ArcSite is minimal. But it
I've been
usually,
trying to find that though.
oh, have you? Okay, well, there you go.
I couldn't find it.
And it does refer you back to, usually, hopefully, it will refer you back to the report title. And many of these reports are available on our website under, take you back here, historic context / survey reports. So the ones that have been digitized are up there. Otherwise, you can go to this survey finding aid index. And see, here's Charleston County. So this has all of the surveys, and these would be the hard copies, which are available if you were to come here to the archives and go down to the research room. They will be able to pull those for you if you wanted to look at something specific.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so there, it looks like there's several things. Here's King Solomon Farmers Union Lodge Hall number 3.
Oh, wow.
Sounds
Okay.
interesting. Yeah, so yeah, there's definitely stuff in this area for sure. Yeah. So, and then you can see, so this is what a National Register entry would look like. On Skipper, there's just a summary and some pictures, and then the actual nomination is right here. If you click this link, it'll open it up for you. I'd actually opened one up earlier, which I will come to in a second, because I want to talk a little bit about the listing process. So let's say you go on ArcSite and, you know, the property you look up, there's no point on it of any kind, you know, there doesn't seem to be any information. So you are interested in seeing about getting it listed. So this is kind of the summary of the listing process. What we encourage people to start with very strongly is a preliminary information form, or a PIF, which is here. It's a very basic form. It doesn't ask for a ton. Some, you know, basic information about the property, you know, construction date, estimated construction date, you know, what was it historically used for? What does it more or less look like? Are there any outbuildings or other features that might be important? And then a sort of brief statement of significance, kind of explaining why you think the property might be considered historic and able to be listed in the National Register. And then photographs are the other really key thing to include here. So this is sort of the dipping your toes in the water aspect of starting a National Register nomination process. And this would come into our office. Myself and Edwin and our supervisor, Brad, review these forms. We have a discussion about them, and we respond back saying either, no, unfortunately, we don't think this would meet the National Register criteria, and we explain why. Or we say, yes, we do think it meets the criteria. Here's a blank form and a lot of instructions and information. So this is a really good first step. It's sort of a, you know, relatively easy thing to complete and to get an answer on. So the next step is actually preparing a nomination form, which is a lot more involved and time intensive. So when we're talking about the National Register, there are 4 criteria, and those are, they're A, B, C, and D. And A is more or less historic events and broad patterns of history. B is significant people. C is architecture or engineering. And D is archaeological significance. So the vast majority of properties get listed under A for history or patterns of history, or C for architecture. Many things are listed for both. So the property needs to be able to meet one of those National Register criteria. It also needs to usually be at least 50 years old, unless it's exceptionally significant, but vast majority are not. So usually at least 50 years old, and it needs to have historic integrity. Now, by historic integrity, we're talking about the historic character of the building. Historic integrity does not mean structural integrity. Historic integrity does not mean condition. Y'all may be familiar, you probably are, with the Seashore Farmers Lodge on Sol Legree. When that was listed in the National Register, it was, I think, very seriously in danger of falling down.
Oh, yes.
Yes, it's obviously been fixed up very
Mhm.
nicely now, but it did not look like that when it got listed.
Yes.
So that kind of gives you an idea. But obviously it had very good integrity. It retained so much of its original material and its original character that is really what's important when you're talking about the National Register. So I have a completed form. Well, here's the nomination I was going to pull up is for the Faber House, which is in the city of Charleston. Sorry. But I thought it was interesting because I thought maybe it would be recognizable since it's this huge house on East Bay Street. Although I think they've painted it blue now, which is a little bit unfortunate in my opinion. It was sort of this great pink pile there on East Bay Street. But this one's really interesting. It was listed for both C for architecture, for the early classical revival architecture from the 1830s, and then also under criterion A for ethnic heritage Black for its use as the Hamitic Hotel in the 1920s and early 30s. So this is a great example of, different layers of history, and that there can be a lot of different ways in which a building can be considered significant. So this is what the nomination looks like. This is a completed one. A lot of, and you'll see this is 27 pages long, so it's not horribly long. A lot of the National Register nomination is sort of checking the right box and counting your resources and all of that. So the real meat and potatoes of the document is section 7, which is the narrative description where you actually describe what the property looks like. So in this case, we have the main house, interior and exterior descriptions. We have a couple outbuildings, and we're identifying here what contributes and what does not. So these outbuildings are original and they are contributing, but this brick wall, which is later, is considered not contributing. There's a discussion about integrity. That's historic integrity again, as we just talked about. And then section 8 is the other kind of meat and potatoes part, which is the argument for why the building meets the National Register criteria. This is where you define the areas of significance, the periods for which it's significant. So again, this one had 2 distinct periods, almost 100 years apart. And then you get into the actual narrative. So you can see here, there's a discussion about early classical revival architecture in Charleston and why this is an important example of that in the city. And then down here, we have criterion A, talking about the uses of the building for a African-American hotel during Jim Crow segregation. So there's a discussion about, what is the landscape of segregation in the city during this time period? How does this hotel fit within that? So that is what forms really the bones of this whole thing, is section 8 and explaining that significance. And the rest of this, there's sort of developmental history, what else happened at this property that isn't part of its National Register significance, but is nevertheless nice to know. And then the rest of this is just bibliography and data that the National Register makes us put in here, but it's not terribly important. So that's just kind of a very quick look at a nomination. In terms of research, I know that was something that people were interested in, and Edwin has some more to say about that as well. But I just wanted to bring this up. This is a research guide that we have on our website. Again, if we went back here, it would be here under research resources. Oop. Getting my,
It looks
Here we
like we have a question, Virginia, the
yeah.
830 number.
I do.
If you wanna, yeah,
Go ahead.
I have a question.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Can you Can you listed Edgefield Island also?
I'm sorry, what was that?
You have buildings on Edgefield Island listed. Can you pull that up if I give
Yes,
you
I
a
believe
number?
I believe that we do.
It's First Baptist Church, Edgefield Island, or the address is 1644 Highway 174, Edgefield.
Edisto Island Baptist Church, listed, 1982.
1644.
Believe that
Right.
that's it.
Okay.
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
So, and this would be on Skipper then as well. And its nomination should be up there.
And you had
Thank you.
something else on that same road though, right?
Looked like it. So these are things that were surveyed but determined not eligible, these little circles. But this, whatever this is, was determined Edisto Island School, that was determined eligible. There's several things on Edisto, I'm sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we can just look on Edisville.
The Presbyterian on
yeah, here it
Edgefield
is.
should be there too.
Mhm.
Is this the church?
Yes.
The Presbyterian Church on Edgefield should be listed also.
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Yes, yeah, it's up here. And then that one would be in Skipper as well.
Thank
Maybe-
you.
I think I stopped sharing for a second. Didn't mean to do that.
Hey, can I have a question, please?
Yeah.
What type of structures that you were talking about that was not qualified, or the reasons why they were not qualified?
So usually if a building or a resource is determined not eligible, often it's an issue of historic integrity, as we discussed, that there had been significant alterations over time that had eroded the character of the building or the resource from the time for which it would be considered significant.
Mhm.
So that can be one thing. The other thing is that, context is important. So for instance, in the city of Charleston, it is extremely hard to get a building individually listed within the city of Charleston, because there's already a historic district there that considers, the larger group of buildings, because there's so much, fantastic architecture there and fantastic history there. So it's very hard to say, well, we're going to list this building at, 111 Trad Street, but not this one at 11112 Trad Street. It's like you have to have a reason to sort of say this one is rising above within the local context, to say this one should be listed, even if the other ones are not going to be listed. Which is part of the reason historic districts exist, to sort of think about when you have a lot of resources that have kind of similar history or similar architecture, and there's justification there in terms of the National Register, then, a historic district is often what is most appropriate.
So then, okay, so then let me ask this to add on to that.
Yeah.
So then, as pertaining to what is happening now throughout Charleston County with the rapid development going on, and you have a number of historic districts in the area,
Yes.
how does that impact with the developments? Because as developments come, it changes the character of the community and also structural integrity, I would say. So of the buildings, because the architect is changing. So then how does that impact your decision on what qualifies or what changes?
Yeah. I mean, setting is an aspect of integrity that is considered. I think generally it's given less weight overall than some of the other ones, like materials and design, for example. So like, for instance, I mean, right now we have a nomination in for the Phillips community. And we understand that there's been a lot of development that is encroaching on that and largely surrounds it. But it does not change the fact that we think Phillips is eligible. Now, if all of Phillips had been wiped out and developed with, suburban houses, then that would be a different story. So there has to be enough there for us to say that, you know, this place still represents the history for which it's significant. And this is a limitation of the National Register. It is not, it is designed to recognize, you know, extant places that have a physical presence. It's not good for recognizing sites where, you know, things may have happened, but there's no physical remnant associated with that. That's kind of where the marker program helps fill in some of those gaps. So yeah, so that kind of thing can affect eligibility, certainly, but yeah, everything, it's always judged on a case-by-case basis in terms of integrity. Is that helpful?
Yes, it is to a certain degree, but it just basically what you're telling me is that there's nothing that could be done to stop the gradual, or the not gradual, but the moderately changing character of this community.
Not from our office, unfortunately.
Okay.
We have yeah,
because
people
we're
often
about to
ascribe
lose,
us power, but we have very, very little in reality.
yeah, but we're about to lose all of our historical character. People say they love the place because of this and that, and then they come and they change it.
Yes.
So that's
Yeah.
what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I mean, that's where the and I'm sure the folks from the county will speak to this, local designation, not the National Register, but local designation, which is totally separate from the National Register, is often where the power to, you know, restrict what people can and can't do with their property comes into play. But that's not what the National Register does. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So just really quick, I just wanted to talk about a couple of research resources. Again, this whole PDF has a lot of different links that you could look at in your own time. It covers a lot of different types of research resources. And then I was going to just say, you know, the places that I usually look first when I'm trying to research a property, the local library is really great. And Charleston County has an excellent one. There's the South Carolina room, which is focused on local history. There's also digital collections, which are excellent. The Charleston collection is newspapers. Old newspapers are a great resource. Digital Sanborn maps are more useful if you live in a municipality, but they are great because these are fire insurance maps from usually the late 19th through the mid 20th century. They're available here from the library. You can also get a lot of them from the Library of Congress. Here's an example. And you can, honestly, what I do with these is I always just Google Sanborn map key to kind of get my bearings here, but like yellow is wood, pink is brick, you know, it tells you this one's a wood frame house, but it's been veneered. B is for dwelling. So it gives you some good basic information about what was there historically in terms of the built environment. Another great resource is deed research, which you can run a chain of title back on a property, sometimes for hundreds of years. So the Register of Deeds office is a great place to do some research. There's also the Low Country Digital Library. They have a very impressive collection. I had just selected one from the records of the Historic Preservation Planner, and you can see there's all these great, you know, historic photos of various buildings in I believe Charleston County. So, and that's just one collection. There are many, many, many more, and they have more than photos. They have, you know, documents and letters and all sorts of things that are digitized. And then finally, you know, Ancestry is always great. We do have an institutional subscription here at the archive. So if you wanted to come do your research, the folks in the research room be more than happy to help you out. I don't know if the county library has a subscription or not, but
Yes, they do.
They do.
They
There
do.
you go. So yeah, so you don't have to pay the rather exorbitant fee. You can you can use your local institutions to access that, and it's great. You know, census data, city directories. You can definitely get a lot of information from Ancestry. So those are sort of my go-to research options. So yeah, and I guess if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And I guess otherwise, Edwin was going to speak a little bit about historical markers.
I think at one point I thought Barbara Goss, did you have a question?
No,
Okay.
I apologize.
All
Thank
right.
you.
All right, no question. We'll next.
It's all you, Edwin.
All right, well, I'm Edwin Breeden. I work here with Virginia at the State Historic Preservation Office. I serve as the co-coordinator for the National Register program. With her, I'm the staff historian here in the SHPO. And another part of my job here is serving as the coordinator for the State Historical Marker Program. And so I'm going to take the next few minutes and give you all an overview of the program, just some really quick basics on it. And then if anyone has any questions, would like more details on, say, the application process, I'll be happy to answer any of those. So first of all, I'll try and share my screen here. All right, so the South Carolina Historical Marker Program. If anyone's not familiar with it by the name, what I'm talking about are these silver and black aluminum markers that you see on the sides of highways or along the sidewalk in certain places all across the state. They're all different types of historical markers that you can find across South Carolina. Some of them are put up by private groups. Some of them are put up by or approved by municipalities. For instance, the town of Mount Pleasant, they have their own historical marker program. All I'm talking about today are these official state historical markers like the one that you can hopefully see on your screen now. This is a marker for the Progressive Club in Johns Island, which was a base of civil rights organizing in the 1960s. Now, maybe the most basic thing to understand about the state marker program is that it is state managed, but it is locally driven. It's also important to understand that it is completely separate from the National Register process. We sometimes get people who think that the two programs are somehow tied together. They're completely separate and they have completely different application processes. But the marker program, like I said, it's state managed but locally driven. And what I mean by that is that all state historical markers have been proposed, funded, installed, and ultimately maintained by outside groups who are typically local organizations in the communities where the markers are being put up. So they're approved by our office and we review the applications. We help conduct research on the proposals. We sign off on the final inscription, but all the other kind of legwork that's associated with it, it's done by local groups. So if any of you or your constituents, your colleagues are part of a group that might be interested in putting up a marker at a place that you think is important, you're invited to submit an application to our office. We'd be happy to review it. Now, in terms of what types of places are eligible for markers, the short answer is all different kinds. You can see here our webpage for the marker program. You can access this similar to the National Register program. It's here under the Historic Preservation tab. You can go to Historic Markers. But we have a lot more details about our program criteria, general guidelines, what types of subjects and places are eligible for state historical markers. You can read a little bit about what to expect from the inscription of the marker, because we do have specific guidelines about the type of language that can be used in a historical marker. There's information about what all we expect to receive in the application, the costs associated with the marker, lots more information. And then once you get down here to the bottom, we have a couple different links that might be especially handy. One is, let's see here. Here we go. The link for the marker application. This is just a short 7-page PDF that pretty much tells you everything you need to know to put together an application for a state historical marker. A lot of it is information that you can also find on the website. This has been kind of a package together here. But at the end, we have our standard application form. We just ask you give us some very basic information about the site and the idea that you have in mind for the marker itself. There are additional materials that we do require sponsors to send us in addition to this. We ask for a brief summary of the site's history, focusing on those aspects of it that you'd like the marker to focus on. We also ask for copies of research that have been done on the marker site's history. Invariably, we end up doing our own additional research here at Archives on top of whatever a sponsor sends us, but we do ask sponsors to provide us copies of any research they've already done, just to, if nothing else, to help get us started and to help us kind of wrap our heads around the project. There's also a $250 application fee that's payable to our office, which that just goes back in to support the program and the various work we do on behalf of it. And then the cost for the markers themselves, you can see here. Eventually, once the marker is approved, this is paid directly by the sponsoring organization to the marker manufacturer. So this doesn't come to our office, that'll go directly to the marker manufacturer. Now, in terms of a marker being approved and what that means is that the sponsoring organization has been approved to put up a state historical marker at that site. It does not mean that that site has been given any type of official historic designation. It does not mean that that site is now an official state historic site. It does not mean that there are any protections or restrictions that have been put on what can be done to that property. The core mission of the marker program, it's very much so purely educational. You know, it's meant to provide people a way of expanding public awareness of a site's importance and then sharing as much of that site story as you can fit on one of these metal markers. And so it's a little bit different from the National Register program in that sense, that even though the National Register does, as Virginia discussed earlier, it only has very, very limited protections for a property. It is an official designation of historic status, which being approved for a state historical marker, that's not something that comes along with being approved for a marker. Now, obviously, if a site is approved for a state historical marker, that can certainly, you know, in an indirect way, it can help serve the cause of preserving a property. You know, it can expand public awareness of a property's importance, and you know, can in the long run, maybe it can encourage people to support other efforts to preserve a property. But there's no immediate implication of being approved for a marker that goes directly towards preservation. Now, one thing Virginia mentioned earlier in terms of comparing the marker program and the National Register, you know, with the register, we look at lots of different things in the application, but the two most basic things are, is this place significant in terms of the National Register criteria, and does it have enough integrity to represent the period in which it was significant? For the marker program, we really only care about the first of those. You know, we really just want to know, does this place have an important story that is worth sharing? It doesn't matter if there are any physical remnants of the property there. It doesn't matter if the property has been changed over time. We routinely approve markers at places for which there is no physical trace of whatever the history is that's the focal point of the marker. And so in some cases, we receive proposals from groups that, you know, they're interested in the register for a site that has a really important history, but because of those changes over time, it doesn't have enough integrity to be eligible for the register. And so in cases like that, if it seems like a good fit for the marker program, we might recommend that a group instead apply for a state historical marker. Now, in terms of the research that goes into a marker project, everything that Virginia mentioned earlier for the register would apply to marker projects. Property research, things like ancestry, Sanborn maps, all of that can be incredibly helpful when putting together historical marker applications as well. The particular types of resources that are going to be most helpful are going to differ depending on what type of property it is that you're marking, you know, whether it's a personal residence versus, say, an historic school or an historic church. And if anyone's interested in kind of specific recommendations along those lines, I'll be happy to, you know, give those in a minute once I've wrapped up the rest of this. But one thing that I did want to point out, which is a type of resource that generally has a variety of applications and might be helpful, including in places outside of, say, like a municipality or an urban area, are historic maps. So let me. All right, so this website, this is one of my favorites. This is the David Rumsey map collection. This is a digital collection of maps that are held, I think, at Stanford University, and they include maps from all over the world, all different types of places, from all different types of periods, including lots of maps from South Carolina and especially Charleston and the Charleston area. I'd say this collection is most useful if you're doing deeper research into, say, like the 17th, 18th, 19th centuries. But if you are looking into those eras of your community's history, it's a great resource. All of the maps, they're available for free download at high resolution images. And you can see here, I'd gone ahead and searched for Charleston, and you see here's an 1844 map of the city of Charleston, 1733, we've got South Carolina maps, and you can just keep going on and on and on and find all different types of resources here. Now, if you're doing research that's focused on maybe say like a property that you own or have a personal connection to, you're probably going to be looking for more recent resources. And so let's see, get this thing out of the way. So one website that's a really great tool for that as far as maps go is historicaerials.com. And see, this is, all right, so this is the homepage for that website. This is a free website. And you can click here on view images and you can search by town, address. And so I lived in Charleston for a few years, so I'm going to pick one of the streets that I lived on and see what comes up. All right, so here we got part of North Charleston. This is off of Dorchester Road. And over here on the left, all of these are years that you can access aerial photography for this area. And so 2017 is the most recently available one. You can see this area right here. And you can go back all the way to 1957. And you can see just how much the land has changed in that time. You can come forward into the present and see things gradually starting to build up and develop. You can also access Topo Maps, topographical maps here. And so in this case, for this particular part of North Charleston, you can see a map going back all the way to 1919. And Topo Maps, you can access these a number of different places, but they can be useful in that they show a level of detail that might be helpful. So you can see here, in this area, we can see that there were 4 buildings of some sort that were recorded. Obviously, we don't have any details about what these buildings were, but they are at least recorded as being present there. And so one other, let's see if I can get it to pull up. One other type of map that's really helpful is historic Scdot highway maps. These are available through the University of South Carolina digital collections. And I should note that USC's digital collections are incredibly helpful beyond this. You can search through, they have several different collections that you can search all at once, and they have a variety of different resources that are available. It might take you some time to kind of sift through it all to find something, but it's definitely worth checking out just to cover all your bases to try and find documentation for a property. But these particular resources, these maps are very helpful in a number of different ways.
Okay. Let's see.
So this is a Charleston County map from 1942. And so you can see here, you can zoom in here and see all sorts of details. Obviously, you can see the road designations. You can also see certain landmarks in the area. See, here's a, let's see this. Yeah, so this is Highway 17. This would be the old USDA, I think the vegetable laboratory out on Highway 17 up this way. Let's see. Yeah, see up here, this would be Dorchester Road again, we were looking at earlier. You can find churches, schools indicated on these maps, and just a variety of different types of information on these DOT maps going back to usually the 1930s and then up through, say, the 1970s or 80s. And again, those are available on the University of South Carolina's website.
Edwin, excuse me.
Yes, sir.
May I done my town of Hollywood?
Yes, sir.
Can you bring up the town of Hollywood historical map?
Sure.
Hollywood, South Carolina.
All right, let's see here.
This is interesting. I love it.
All right, so I'm actually going to go to, this is I'm glad you asked this question because we can look at a different type of database here. So this is the U.S. Geological Survey. You can search for Topo Maps here on their website. And one thing that's nice about this one, as opposed to, say, historical aerials, is you can actually download the full resolution Topo Maps from this website. So we're going to search for Hollywood. South Carolina. All right, so here you just click on the specific place that you're interested in, and then down here at the bottom, it'll show you the maps that are available. And so this is the name of this map. It's for Wadmalaw Island, but it'll include Hollywood up here in the corner. It's from 1919. And so you can see it just barely captures Hollywood here, but you can see it does indicate, a number of structures here up at the crossroads as being present there in 1919.
You
now-
showed another map with more specifics in the town itself.
Yes, sir. Let's see. That'd probably be the DOT map. All right, here we go. Yeah, so this is the 1942 DOT map. Here's Hollywood. And so you can see all along the road here, you can see the location of different schools and churches going here to the west and over here to the east as well.
Okay.
And so these maps, we use these a lot for markers because a lot of the applications that we get for markers are for historic schools and churches. And so these maps are a really useful resource for markers and, again, for register as well. And so for the sake of time, I'm going to cut it off there. But if anyone has any questions about the marker program or anything else, I'd be happy to answer them.
All right, thank you.
I have a question about Park and Ferry area.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, the question I have, it's the address is 5779. Park and Ferry. That's the Willtown Community Center.
All right. 5759.
5779.
79. What was the road name again?
Parkers Ferry.
Parks Ferry Road. Gotcha. All right. Is this Cottageville?
No,
Adams Run?
Adams Run.
Adams Run.
Gotcha. All right. Ooh, it's right on the edge. Let's see. So I don't know if that one's going to be very helpful, but let's see a more recent one maybe.
They had a school in that area on Parkers Ferry near 17 almost.
Oh, no, that's not going to work. All right, so you might find something up here. Bear with me 1 second. I got to get my bearings. Here we go. All right, so here you can see. I'm not able to pull up the specific addresses with this type of map, but does this cover the area that you're interested in?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And yeah, and like I said, the DOT maps, with all these details, these are all available on USC's website. You can search for them by county, and then you can see the specific years that they have available. And you can, like I said, you can pull them up and view them for free.
Well, I think that's pretty
Okay, thank
interesting.
you.
'Cause I can see the school, Parkers Ferry School there, and looks like about 3 different churches in the area.
Yeah.
So that's pretty good, yeah.
Right. Yeah, and so one of the things that this type of this map, this type of resource is helpful for is if you're trying to determine when say like a school or a church move from one location to another, this can help at least give you a sense of, all right, well, it was at this location by this year, or it was gone from this location by this year.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a
Sounds
question.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you.
Question?
Yeah,
Go
hi, this is Ned Roper. First, I would say thank you, Ms. Johnson, for all that you do, and this is an outstanding effort
Welcome.
today. And Mr. Breeden, along with Virginia, I've seen your names on a couple of documents, and in fact, on the document that I got from the historical marker office, Mr. Emerson, and he had your name placarded on the back of this document. I'm looking at it because we're in the process. I'm working with an organization to, again, put the actual marker on William Gresham Eggett High School. So we're working that, and I'm working the action here, and I'm seeing your name. So as I I'm trying to put all the documents in place, I see your name. So everything you're talking about, I guess, fits the need for me, correct?
Yeah, so we actually, for the Gresham Megget marker, I know Ms. Johnson's familiar with that one as well. That one's been approved by our office, the
Yes.
inscription for that one.
Yes.
So yeah, so I mean, so both of y'all already have some familiarity with the marker program through that.
Well, through that, and what I'm trying to do is, again, get whatever documents that was requested or notified. I went to the Charleston County office and they gave me some forms. I want to make sure the forms that I have, and maybe this is not the vehicle to talk about it, but I can call you later. Again, we're interested in doing everything we need to do.
Sure.
Not much quickly, but we want to do it right the first time. So that's where maybe I can give you a buzz, and I want to hold up everyone here, but we're actively pursuing this. So I saw your name and I see your face. So again, good job. You'll probably get a call from me as we're pressing forward. So that's all I really wanted to stress.
Sure, by all means, so feel free to call me anytime.
Okay, then the other question was, you spoke about these historical aerial site. I want to use that for my own reference here on James Island, but I need that site. Is that historicaerial.com? Is that the site?
Historicaerials.com is the one that I referenced. And there's also, again, University of South Carolina, they also have some aerial photography that's available on their website. They don't have it for all counties in the state. It's a little bit limited, but they do have some photographs that aren't available here on Historic Aerials. But yes, the one that I was referring to was historicaerials.com.
Yeah, the one you showed initially when you were talking about the Charleston City area and some of Highway 17. The detail I'm looking at from just watching what you were showing, that's the detail I'm looking at and looking on James Island. So that's where I'll go.
Okay.
That's where I'm looking.
Okay.
All righty. Thank you again. Appreciate it.
All right. Okay. Well, Mr. Breeden, see how popular you are? We must have about 5 of those board members online that's working. Miss Deborah Barrett, I see that she was on here as well. I know that she has been talking with you and Mr. Roper and Gilliard. So I know we're kind of getting ready to end our time, but we've got to hear from Charleston County Planning Department next. So Mr. Evans. Is he not on? Okay, the Kiowa room. All right. Here. Okay. I was just getting ready to say, now, why did he leave before his time?
Because I was smart.
Okay. All right.
All right.
You have it.
Okay. So this is the staff that's in the room right now. Me and Andrea Melisek is the deputy director, and Nikki Grimble is in charge of our community planning and historic preservation. So we have an historic preservation commission. They're appointed by county council. There are 9 members on that commission, and they review and recommend designations for historic properties and districts, applications for National Register listing, and final decision-making for certificates of historic appropriateness. So this ordinance was adopted in 2018. It created the commission. It provides a way for communities to designate themselves as historic, as being recognized by the county. Provides a layer of protection for historic properties and districts because it requires that review of the Historic Preservation Commission through that certificate of appropriateness. And it does provide a public process where community members can be informed and provide input on proposed work in the district. So our current designations include Hebron Center Historic Property. That's a church on Johns Island. Recently, the Phillips community, that was our very first historic district in Charleston County. And we do have some applications coming up. The St. Mark's UME Church on Old Charleston Road that just had public hearing last week. And it goes to Planning and Public Works Committee this Thursday. And we also have right across the street from St. Mark's, the new Bethel AME Church, they're interested, and they're going to our Historic Preservation Commission for that recommendation on November 16th. We've had some other communities that have contacted us that have been interested in knowing the process to become a designate of a district, historic district. Those include 10 Mile and Battery Island and Beefield. Also, we've had discussions with people in the Red Top community about discussing them the process as well. So, as far as what makes something historic, yeah, Nikki,
Okay.
why don't you do these?
Yeah, so these are the approval criteria that the Historic Preservation Commission and County Council would use to determine if a district or a property is historic. So we don't have anything based on a particular age or date of construction, but more about what the property means. So it could be tied to the character, interest, history, or value as a part of the rural county or in the state or the nation. It could be a site where there was an event that was significant in history. It could be associated with a specific person or exemplify the cultural, political, economic, social, ethnic, or historic heritage of the county, state, or nation, or embodies distinct characteristics of a certain style or period in architecture, engineering. It could be associated with a specific designer or an example showing a type of innovation in construction. It could be a part showing distinctive elements of community planning or neighborhood features. It could yield information that would be archaeological sites or potentially has some information in its actual grounds. And then also if it has been deemed eligible for or already listed on the National Register.
Oh, but I have a question there. Can you just tell me something about the features that could be represented? Give us a little example.
A familiar visual feature of a neighborhood or community. Probably a good example, I would say maybe out at Solid Creek, how they have those long, skinny lots. That would be an element that you could, point out as being a part of, very specifically to the Charleston County area, but also representing that whole community because you see it throughout those long, skinny lots. Okay,
So that's the property itself.
Mm-hmm. Or it could be, a specific type of building or house type. If it's a neighborhood full of bungalows or little ranch houses, those would be distinctive features that could be found in a whole neighborhood or community.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have my hand up.
Oh, sorry, we turned
Davis.
the pictures off. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Okay. I just wanted to, I have a question and a comment that Solid Creek is also in that group for historic districts. As a matter of fact, we were planning to meet with Joel and staff, but then the numbers started going up with COVID. So we're working on making some adjustments there to come together for Solid Creek to be in the district as well, a historic district as well. And the other question I have, I think it would probably go to, what's her name, Vanessa, if she's still there. The Solid Creek Community.
Yeah, I'm here.
Virginia, I'm sorry, Virginia.
Okay.
The Solid Creek Community Center is started out as an a schoolhouse. And we have talked briefly about putting it into the registry as well, or either having a marker. And but right now we're trying to bring the building up. We have some maintenance work to be done, some renovations to be done to the building, and thought that it might be better to go ahead and do that. We have the history, a brief history of the building, because it's been used by us and a number of others. The building is over 50 years old. And as a matter of fact, Some of it was built, well, all of it has been built by members of the W. Gresham Make graduates years ago. And so the center has a rich history, let me put it that way.
Yeah.
And so my thing was, in a situation like that, where we are trying to do some work to the building to bring certain things up to grade and all that, would it be better for us to have just simply a marker for right now, or to have it listed in the registry?
I mean, do you mean like how will the renovations potentially affect the historic integrity? Is that kind of what you're getting at? Yeah. I mean, I guess I would have to know more about the specifics about what's being done and what's being changed to really answer that question. But
well, it's just
yes,
some floor work and a roof and maintenance type things.
Maintenance type
But
stuff.
we
Yeah,
also,
I mean that kind of
we
thing.
also discussed possibly expanding it so we could have more space. So
Okay.
I knew that would probably have to come before a review board, and it put it.
Well, yeah. So the work would not be reviewed by our office, even if it was listed, unless there was some kind of trigger again with that federal funding or permitting. But I mean, generally speaking, like the historic integrity doesn't mean like no changes have happened over time. Like there's an expectation that things will be updated. Like for instance, we've never, I don't think, ever said like a property wasn't eligible because it has a new roof, for example. So, you know, basically it would be if you're mostly kind of replacing things in kind or repairing them instead of replacing them, that kind of thing, it's probably not going to be a big integrity concern in terms of the National Register. Now, something like an addition, that could potentially impact the historic integrity of the building in a way that might be problematic for the register. But yeah, it would very much depend on the specifics, and obviously the marker program, that's not a concern.
Okay. Thank you. That answers my question.
Great.
Thank you all very much. Hey, planning. Thank you.
You know, I'm just thinking, I've seen the building, and so the building basically still looks the same as it was when, as far as layout, when it was being used by W. Gresham Make. So I'm just wondering if maybe Ms. Shavers, you might consider, if you need more space, just adding another building right next to that.
That's always a thought.
Mhm.
Like I said, we're in the thinking and thought process, so that's a thought we'll put on the table.
Okay, and I have a question. So what is needed to become a historic district? If Ms. Grimble?
Yeah, so the historic district application is a completely voluntary process. So staff does not go out and pursue different districts to see if they want to, if they will become a district, but it's a community-driven process. So the community comes to us, and we work with them throughout the process to get their application in order, and then facilitate that through the council process. But the actual application requirements, we'll work with the community members to establish a boundary for the district. So we'll work on a map. There is a petition that's required that shows consent of the historic designation that contains at least 51% of the registered voters within that district are in favor. People that are not registered to vote are encouraged still to show their support, so they can sign a separate support petition if they aren't able to sign on behalf of the actual application. There's a pretty simple application form with just some basic information of who the applicant is, what the area includes as far as the acreage, and some general descriptors of streets and address location information. And then there's a letter of intent, and those 11 approval criteria that I just went through a couple of minutes ago. The letter of intent will describe how that community meets any number of those criterion. So it can be written as a narrative where you say, we believe that our district meets criteria A, B, E, and F, and here's why. Or you can answer each different criteria individually. So if you want to write a paragraph or two about specific people that are associated with the district, and then another paragraph about how it shows a different characteristics of a certain period or style. So we're really kind of flexible about how you want to write that narrative for the district. And then any other additional documents or maps, oral histories, photographs, anything else that you want to include with your application, we will include that with all of our packets that are given to Historic Preservation Commission and to County Council. And there is a $25 application fee.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. A similar application process is for just a single property. The main difference is that the form has to be signed by the property owner. And of course, you don't need a map, but there is the same letter of intent where the applicant will describe how they meet the different approval criteria. This is the designation process. So we'll have a meeting with our applicants. It'll be any combination of us that we will just sit down and discuss everything about the application with the applicant, see if they need any assistance in gathering information, or if they need any help at the Register of Deeds office, and just see how we can support their application and help them kind of get to that end goal. The formal application filing is 6 weeks in advance of each monthly Historic Preservation Commission meeting. And those are held here at the county building on the third Tuesday of each month. So the first part is that it'll go to the Historic Preservation Commission meeting, and they make a recommendation to County Council. Then there is a County Council public hearing where staff will give the same presentation that they give at the commission meeting. And it is a great opportunity for the public to provide their support, or if they're against it, we're happy to have them come speak against applications as well. Or members of the public can submit letters, and all of that is funneled to the council members, so everybody has all of the information. And then there is a Planning and Public Works Committee recommendation and 3 readings at County Council. So overall, it's about a 3 to 4 month process from when you file your application until it's hopefully approved by council. There's a lot of pros and cons, and I won't go through all of these, but it's probably the #1 thing by having a locally designated district or property is that it can work to protect the character of a community by requiring the public notice and public hearing for things that otherwise would be allowed by right. So if a property is in a historic district and they want to subdivide their property into 2 lots, that has to be reviewed first by the Historic Preservation Commission before it can be approved. Whereas if it's outside of a district, then that's just something that's normally done on a staff level, so there's no public notification involved in that. Some other things here have more to do with, like, if you're receiving grant funding or any sort of federal tax credits. These could be some pros and cons to consider. Another big question that we get a lot is if a designation would increase or decrease a property value or their taxes. The local historic designation does not increase or decrease the property values, and the tax assessment data does not take into account the historic status. The other thing is, well, what does it actually mean? If I'm in a historic district, what does that mean for my property? So like I was saying a moment ago, the certificate of historic appropriateness is required to be obtained from the Historic Preservation Commission anytime you want to get a zoning permit, anytime a subdivision plat application is made, or if there is a site plan review process. So that would be any sort of development beyond single family homes. And one other note is that all National Register listed properties or districts are automatically brought into the Historic Preservation Commission review process. So we look at those the same way as a local designation. So if Solid Agree were to go and be listed on the National Register, they would automatically be kind of taken under the Historic Preservation Ordinance and reviewed on a case-by-case basis. This is that CHA application process, very similar, but you have a pre-application meeting with staff. The Historic Preservation Commission does have final decision-making authority, so they can approve or deny an application or ask an applicant to go back and make some sort of change and come back to be reviewed again. And all of those are publicly notified, so there's ads in the newspaper and letters are sent to all properties within 300 feet of a subject site or within a district. And then also on our interested parties list. So if anybody is interested to be in being added to our historic preservation IP list, then you would get email or email notifications about every application that were to come through. I think that's probably about it, but we can take any questions. And if you have any specific questions about your community or you want to set up a pre-application meeting, you can reach out to us at this email address or phone number.
Okay, someone just texted me a question, and he was asking about a public school called Cutbridge School. That that's on Riverland Drive, off of Riverland Drive. And so there's no building there. It really, the property is located in James Allen County Park now. And so they were wondering what could be done to recognize that school. And from my memory, I'm just hearing that you all said any property that you think might be significantly, I guess has historic significance, you can start with a marker. I mean, it doesn't have to be on the historical register to have a marker, right?
Yes, and it sounds like this would certainly be eligible for a state historic marker.
Mm-hmm. But then beyond that, you'd have to go to another level or, well, do y'all handle the beginning application for the National Historic Registry?
So if an applicant would like for the Historic Preservation Commission to review their application before they go to the state, then the HPC can review it, but it is definitely not required.
And it'd be cheaper to just start with you with $25, right? Okay.
Well, sorry. I was gonna say there's no cost associated with applying for the National Register. There's just costs associated if you're applying for a state historical marker.
Okay.
The cost of the National Register is time.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay.
It takes a lot of time to go through that process and time to write the nomination, or you can pay someone to write the nomination, which would obviously be money, but there are no fees for the program.
Okay. Ms. Chavis?
I have a question, please. Okay, in reference, I just wanted to piggyback on what was said about the Crosscut School being on Charleston County Park. They can still put up a marker if they get the approval of the county and the county park in recreation. Is that something that can be done?
Well,
they're just needing the permission of the park or county council to put it.
You mean in terms of their permission as the property owner?
Yes, to put the marker up, yeah.
Right, yes, certainly if the owner of a property is open to placing a marker there, the actual applicant for the marker doesn't have to be the property owner, but we certainly want to, make sure that the property owner is, at the very least, is not opposed to the project. So if the county was open to that, that certainly wouldn't be an issue.
Okay, the other question is that I have, and I'm gonna be quick, Anna, okay, is that when you have a designated someplace that has a historic value. And I'm going to use, for example, the Limehouse warehouse that was on Savannah Highway. The owners chose not to, I guess, to use that or to have it designated as a historic district, a historic site. What type of community involvement or community input could have been given in order to either stop that from being torn down, or would it have even helped to stop it from being torn down? You know the site I'm talking about? The old warehouses on Savannah Highway?
Yes, ma'am. I really think the only thing that could have been appealed was. Can you hear me?
And I'm trying. Yeah, I can hear you, but you're coming in kind of sketchy. There was two sites that I know that Charlie Smith had brought up, was the warehouse on Savannah Highway, and also the governor's house over here on James Island. I think Medical University bought that house. And but the shed, the old shed or packing house on Savannah, off of Savannah Highway, was actually torn down.
They have it, Ms. Shavers. Okay, go ahead. I think Ms. Peters was going to address that. She knows what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Since it wasn't on our list, like you said, and the property owner didn't choose to request it to be on the list, and our ordinance requires the property owner to make that application, I think really the only thing the community could have done is to appeal, the decision to issue the permit to demolish the structure. But of course, by that point, the structure was gone. So.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
I was just wondering if the community had gotten notice in time, would there have been any way to stop something like that? Not just for that site, but for future sites.
Well, when a property owner comes in to ask for a zoning permit to build something on their property or demolish something, unless that property is actually designated historic, or in some instances, if it's within 300 feet of a property that's designated as historic, there is no notification process. Like if you wanted to build a house on your property, we wouldn't notify your neighbors that you were going to do that, unless you were on a historic property. So there isn't really a notification process for those things that are allowed by right in zoning.
Okay. So now then, I know that before the historical district, before the board was created for Charleston County, one of the first tasks was to go out and identify such sites throughout Charleston County. So with that, I'm talking about the ones that maybe the owners didn't list. So that has been done so that even if they come in, the community can be notified.
I think what you might be talking about are our historical surveys. We had some done in '89 and 1992, and then we had the 2016 update to it, which really focused on the development patterns in the settlement communities. But those were just surveys, and that's, I think you saw in some of the pictures that Virginia showed, some of the old survey cards from like the '89 and '92 surveys. But there was hesitancy on both the Planning Commission and County Council's part to just go ahead and list those as part of the county list. They didn't want to do that unless a property owner came in and specifically asked for it. So they are not included on our list, and there aren't any extra notification processes involved because they weren't ever put on the list.
Oh, okay.
And I think I want to just make a comment from my memory of that discussion. At County Council, we were concerned that sometimes, let's say a building you think should be recognized as a historical site. Well, I mean, the owner is responsible for for the care of that building, the maintenance and everything. So we didn't want to put a burden on a homeowner if they really did not want that building to be recognized. we want it to be an agreeable situation. So hopefully you can talk with the owner whenever you see a building like the Richardson House, for instance, and ask the owner, to consider making it something historical. I see Mr. James Blake looked like he was trying to get our attention, and Reverend Morrison. So if we could have those two comments, and then we'll be ready to kind of wrap this up because we're past our time.
Oh, wow.
So Mr. Blake?
No, I was just listening in.
Okay, I see you.
Very good meeting. No, very superior meeting.
Okay, and Reverend Morrison, were you trying to make a comment? I just got a call from him. Okay. Well, let me just say, I want to thank our presenters here. Now we know who Mr. Breeden is, Mr. Edwin Breeden is. You gotta do something about that name.
I didn't realize I was this infamous down there.
And Ms. Harness, and also our staff. We want to recognize all of the planning staff members for coming out. Now, I do see that I was supposed to make an announcement. I did not forget. So you can see on your screen here, the Wadmalaw community event is coming up. I think it's the 27th of September, and they're inviting any and everybody to come out. We have the auditor's office will be there, the library, our community development department, and the voter registration. So all of that will be going on from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. on September the 27th, next Monday, at the Wadmalaw Senior or Community Center. And I think there is, let's see. Oh, the next roundtable discussion will be on the Greenbelt program. So we want to kind of tie some of this in with land use as well. Okay. That being said, it is 2 p.m. See y'all next time.
Thank y'all.
All right. Thank y'all very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Take care.
Thanks.